Hello, thanks for being here for another week in the books. Last week I mentioned that boys and I were getting over being under the weather, and I really thought we were. But today my beverage that I have beside me is some emergency, because we're not totally over it apparently. I'm pulling up my Goodreads because I've got 4 books to talk to you about, so at least being under the weather didn't keep me from conquering some texts. So let me get that pulled up and then we'll kick it off with the first book. So we're getting started with a book called The Tainted Cup, which is a fantastical murder mystery situation. And it got on my radar because I saw it when I was browsing at my local library, and the cover, the binding, caught my attention because it's this very nice green color, and I was just like, what is this? So I picked it up. I didn't get it the first time that I saw it, but I took a picture of it and I was like, okay, next time when I'm not already checking out 20 books, I'll remember to come back and grab it. So I did, and I was really interested in the fact that this magic system in this world seemed like nothing I'd kind of read before. And I think that held true throughout the whole thing, because this world has a lot of like plant magic and a lot of different types of magic that you can access, but it's not like everyone can access these same magical abilities, and how each person taps into their capabilities is kind of interesting and unique. Like the main character, he's an assistant investigator to just a higher up investigator he's assigned to, and he is what is known as an engraver. So he carries with him different vials of different substances that he smells. They're very distinct smells, and he'll smell it and then like observe a room, and then later when he goes to tell the person that he works for all the details about what's in that room, he just has to smell that vial and all of the memories come back to him, because he's had some special enhancement that makes him retain those details, those specifics in that way. But he needs the strong scent to kind of draw forth those memories. So I think there's some interesting world building and magic in that sense that I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then, as I mentioned, it's a murder mystery. And so you've got something right off the bat where there's a crime scene to be investigated, and the main character, his name's Din, by the way. Din goes to investigate it, and right off you're knowing that something is going on, some bigger thing could be at play. And then of course, as the story progresses, there are a couple more bodies that end up, as part of the progression of, hey, this is getting bigger and bigger, this is involving more and more people. And Din's boss is an investigator who is known for being quirky, at times difficult, and also just kind of uncanny and eerie in the way that she doesn't have to leave her house in order to solve mysteries or piece clues together. She's very Sherlock Holmes in that way, where she can see sort of the details that maybe aren't as obvious to other people, and she's like, oh, that's something that we need to look into, or, oh yes, I see the solution, because if you said this, that means this and this. So it was a little interesting to have such a Sherlock Holmes type of person in the mix of just a regular murder mystery. Excuse me. And I think that the world building was interesting enough to get my imagination going about just like, what's the setting of where these people are at, and the magic again was interesting to me, that I was intrigued in understanding that more. I do think that there were some pieces of the world building that needed to be more developed and more spelled out, but it was immersive, and I did feel like I was there with Din as he was investigating things and in the thick of things. I did find him a little bland though. He wasn't really dynamic. like I kind of had hoped he would be. I feel like it was just that someone needed to go gather the clues, someone needed to be there to make observations, so that way the quirky investigator he works for can really be that character who you're like, oh yeah, let's get back to her, she was interesting. But I think that just came at the cost of the main character being, a little bland. But I think that for people who enjoy murder mysteries and then who enjoy fantasy might find a very nice marriage of the two here. So if that's your thing, maybe you should check this one out. Next up is my favorite thing of the week, which is 60 Songs That Explain the 90s. I went the audiobook route on this one, and I think you should too. The author is a music critic, but also he has a podcast that's music related, and he's got very strong John Mulaney vibes, which works for me because I think John Mulaney is pretty funny, but it might not vibe with you if you don't, so just go into it knowing that. But as the title suggests, this is looking at music that had a defining impact on the 90s. You look at specific songs, but then also artists and bands who had their defining moment as well. I think that music literature is very interesting. I think music history, looking at what's trending and why, or what bands seem to have a really particular following at a very particular time. It's all just very interesting to me. I love music. I listen to music a lot, and I just enjoy knowing like how it came to be, how it is today, or the bands that I love from 70s, 80s, whatever it might be, what their story is, and why they have a lasting reputation and legacy. So that's what he's doing in this book, but obviously specifically the 90s. And he came of age, grew up in that era, so he has some reflections that he shares looking at like what the songs meant to him, not just like what they meant to America or society at large or whatever it might be. And I appreciate that, getting his kind of 2 cents, because it makes it a little more personal. You understand the kind of flair that he's bringing to how he approaches music and why he picked the songs that he did. It was a wide range of genres that he does examine, which I appreciate, because obviously there was a lot happening in a lot of different genres, from hip hop to grunge to pop, all of it. And I think what really like made this a great experience for me was that I laughed more times than I expected to, and I love when books make me laugh. The way that he talked and delivered lines, and obviously how he wrote it, it was funny to me. There were different times where he'd say things that I was just like, who thinks that? Like when he's talking right away about My Heart Will Go On by Celine Dion, he was talking about just the power of her voice and that she should be a character in Smash Bros. Or at one point he calls Britney Spears a final boss of pop music or something like that. Anyway, it was funny. I enjoyed that. It wasn't taking itself too seriously, and it was just having fun with music while also asking some fun questions as a music critic. And it was just a good time, a good listen. I really enjoyed that, and it was helpful to have in my ear, entertaining me as the organization of the house continues on. So I would recommend this for some light reading if you need, I don't want to say a palate cleanser, but something where you're like, I've been reading a lot of heavy things, or I've just been reading this one genre and need kind of a switch with something that's not going to be too much. Pick this one up because it was enjoyable, it was fun. I thought it was interesting too, thinking about the different artists he picked out, the different songs. There were even some songs that I was like, I don't really know what this song is, so I found them on Spotify, and I found some things that I was like, oh, I like this too, and added it to a couple of my playlists. So you might find some music that you haven't explored yet, which I think is fun too. So I recommend this one, and again, go the audiobook route if you pick this one up. We've got another nonfiction up here with Poets and Writers Complete Guide to Being a Writer. Now this I picked up because that's kind of what I'm working at. Obviously, if you found me on my website, you would know that I am working on my literary and writing aspirations. And so I found this at the library and took it home because I was like, I'm gonna take some notes. I'm gonna get some wisdom from people in the industry. And this book really does look at all of the aspects of being a writer, from helping you kind of figure out, how do I get my ideas pulled together and think about like a writing routine or a word goal count, something to get me started. And then when you've started and you've got your manuscript, do you want to go the traditional publishing route? Do you want to self-publish? What are the pros and cons of both? And then considering, if you reach out to find an agent, how might you do that? Once you have an agent, where do you go from there? All of those different things, down to like when you publish. This is how publicity and marketing usually goes. So it's very thorough in examining all those pieces. Helpful if this is what you want to be getting into. I wouldn't recommend actually going about it the way that I did. I read it cover to cover, but I think that this might be more useful to use as a reference guide as you're going along in your own writing career, and when you need a specific chapter about how to query an agent, or how to think about independent presses, or thinking about legal stuff, contract deals. Then maybe it's like, okay, I'll go to this book, I'll read that specific chapter. But if you're not needing it, then it might seem like a lot of information that you're just like, I'm not interested in this right now. Like, yeah, in theory, this is good to know, but I'm not gonna remember this. I gotta take such copious notes if I'm gonna keep that somewhere in my head. So maybe pick it up as a reference text as you need it. I'm very glad that the last book I have to talk about is Uncle Tom's Cabin. As I had mentioned at the end of last video, that I really wanted to finish that by the end of this week, so I did, and that's another classic off my list. I'm just not sure I have gathered all of my thoughts yet about this book, or feel like I've reflected on it enough. So I'm gonna review it here with you, but I think I'm still gonna let it percolate and think about it a little more, especially because I'm reviewing it for my Class X project. But what I have to say generally right now is that it was a fine story that I just don't think was written very well or structured super well. So the premise is that there are two characters that we are primarily following. We've got Uncle Tom and we've got Eliza, and they are enslaved in Kentucky. They both have the same master who has got some debts that have somehow fallen into the hands of a slave trader, and so to settle that debt, the master makes an arrangement that he's going to sell Uncle Tom and then Eliza's 5-year-old son. And so that's how the story starts off. You've got that predicament for these individuals of being separated, the prospect of them being separated from their home and their families, because Uncle Tom, he is married with kids, and then obviously Eliza, this is her son. And so right from the get-go, there's that issue, and Eliza decides that she is going to run away with her son. And then you've got Uncle Tom, who is like, all right, if this is what's coming for me, all right, I'm going to be sold further south. But then to complicate things more is Eliza's husband, who is a slave at a different plantation. He's already made plans to run away because he is like, I am not putting up with the brutality and indignities that my master puts me through. And so he has already planned to run away to Canada. And so now you've got Eliza on the run with her son, and you're like, what's gonna happen with George? And then of course Tom, you're like, I can't believe this is happening to Tom. And so there's compelling threads, no doubt. I just thought that it wasn't written with great skill. I don't know if that's rude to say that, but like, for instance, you spend primarily the most time with Tom and his thread. And Eliza and George just kind of get left by the wayside at one point for like 100 pages at least, that you're like, where are these other people? Where is this other thread? Should we care about them now? And then conveniently at the end, they came back and all these things were kind of tied together in nice little bows or whatever. And it just felt kind of like poorly thought out and poorly planned, or maybe kind of rushed of like, oh, forgot about this thread, gotta tie them back in somehow. And maybe that's not how the author originally thought it or thought about it at all, but that's how it kind of came across to me as a reader, that I was just not impressed with the wordsmithing or the technical pieces of the craft. I did find those characters of Tom and Eliza and George, and there were a couple other characters, especially in Tom's story, who I was like, oh, that's interesting, and I'm interested in their thread and the things that are complex in their life. But overall, I wasn't super impressed. It was what it was. So do with that what you will. If you are looking for classics to read, this one, I'm not going to not recommend it, but it also isn't top of the list of classics that I would recommend. That's this week for you. All the books I got through. Still keeping company with War and Peace, of course. That's going to be for a while. But I just wanted to let you know that next week is going to be kind of a different video. Still going to have some book reviews for you, but different theme from just recapping my week. So keep a lookout for that. And in the meantime, I hope that you have some excellent reads this week.